everyone. My name is Ashley Mctivier. I am the Student Programs Manager for the NASBA Center for the Public Trust. I really appreciate you guys coming today and all week if you've been lucky enough to join us Tuesday and Wednesday as well. Today is the final day of Lead with Integrity, and we have just been so lucky to have such an amazing speaker lineup. You guys will not be disappointed in your speaker today as well. Just a couple housekeeping things as we continue to get started. Please remember to stay mute throughout the entire presentation unless there's some questions being asked. Feel free to use the chat box right below if you have any questions you may have, and we'll make sure that Tracy gets to those by the end of the presentation. We are going to be sending out a survey this afternoon asking for your feedback. We want to know what you guys want to hear about, and we'll continue to plan awesome Lead with Integrity sessions for you each spring and fall semester. So we definitely want to hear what you think. And if you have any tips or tricks or things that you would like to see, please make sure you let us know. Also, please go ahead and share your screens if you wouldn't mind. Stay muted, but go ahead and share your screens. I know that Tracy would probably appreciate seeing all of your beautiful faces instead of just little black squares on her screen. So with that, I will go ahead and turn it over to Cedric Newbern, our Operations Director, and he's going to introduce our new host.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I am excited. This has been a fun week so far, and I have the privilege of introducing you to a really good friend of mine. She's more like a big sister and has mentored me over the years. I've actually known her for literally over 30 years, and I know neither of us look like we could be that old, but this is Tracy Odie Blunt, and I know she's going to give you her whole story, and we're going to have a great conversation. But she is currently the Senior Vice President of Communications for the NFL, which is really fun. But I really want her to talk to us about her story, her path, and how she got here. And we will open this up, so we'll use the chat feature so you can ask her questions as well. But everyone, I want to welcome Tracy Odie Blunt.
Thank you, Cedric. I really appreciate it. And good afternoon, everybody. Really excited for the opportunity to talk a little about the impact of diversity and inclusion through authentic leadership. Sounds like you guys have had a fantastic week of speakers. And so I hope that I could be on the same level and give you the same inspiration that I'm sure you've had with the other speakers. So I just wanted to start off by honoring and applauding the mission to pursue the development, empowerment, and promotion of ethical leadership at NASBA Center for the Public Trust. I think I pulled a quote that says, "We believe it is no longer acceptable for any of us who disagree with racist behavior to be quiet bystanders or to ignore the unjust behavior plaguing our nation." I think it's an affirmation to the commitment towards establishing diversity and inclusion as a pillar within the organization. And it's laudable and frankly, a relevant discussion, given that we've all witnessed how the lack of ethical leadership can systemically dismantle a nation, to be sure. So leadership is an essential element for the success of any entity, cross-industry, cross-discipline, individual. It can make or break the viability, constitution, and reputation of each. So there are 4 principles that I'd like to talk about today. I'm not gonna spend a long time because I know Cedric and I are gonna get into a Q&A, and I absolutely want to take your questions, and I'm an open book, so you can ask me anything. But the principles of ethical, authentic leadership and diversity and inclusion are comprised, in my opinion, of 4 core characteristics: knowledge, intention, conviction, and action. So leadership teams have to be equally invested in acquiring relevant, current, knowledgeable, and be current and knowledgeable about the history and purpose of and the need for diversity and inclusion in their business. So every business should have diversity and inclusion as part of their core. It shouldn't be, this is how we do things and there are no diverse voices or diverse people to be part of the conversations and part of the business planning. Because you want wherever you're working to reflect either your customers or the nation as a whole and the direction that we're going in. So if you were to ask 3 different people what the difference was between diversity and inclusion, I can guarantee you'd probably get three different answers. So I've heard this saying before, I use it a lot. Diversity is a fact and inclusion is a choice. So it's advisable to ask yourself first to make sure that your knowledge on whatever the issue is on point. And so once uniformity is of the knowledge is retained, then leadership has to collaborate and collectively decide within their organizations what their, and my second point, intentions are to introduce it to their company or their organizational culture or climate. And then intentional use of this knowledge invites a coalescence, and it demonstrates the desire for everybody in that organization to provide valuable insights that may not have otherwise been considered. So if you've just got one group that's making all the decisions, and there's again not diversity of voices, not inclusion, not opportunity for people to have a decision or process making, then it doesn't bode well for that company. And then leadership teams and colleagues all have to be in agreement. Like, we can agree to disagree, but we should all be approaching something in the like manner. And so when you share the same knowledge and then you have a vision of what this intention is to implement, it sometimes takes time for everybody to get engaged and excited, but before it becomes conviction, which is my third point. So you have to have knowledge, you have to have intention in order for there to be conviction with what you're working towards. And to me, conviction is a crucial and pivotal point within any leadership team and organization, because it signifies unity, passion, and most importantly, it solidifies everybody's understanding of what the mission is. So hopefully everyone will deliver the same answer when you're asked about the organization's position on diversity, inclusion, here where I'm at the NFL, social justice, and other ethical stances. And the question is why? And that's because if the 3 points that I've just made, knowledge, intention, and conviction. So if everybody's knowledgeable about what that is, intentional in why they do that, and that they share the same convictions around that action, then everybody's ready to take that fourth step, which is the action. And so there are a myriad of ways for organizations to take action. And what I like to say is walk the talk. It's one thing to say, we're going to do all of these things and we believe in X, and then your actions don't show that. And I think the most impactful platform to make action happen and spread the word is through authentic communication, but that has to come from leadership, and that comes from the top. So it's disingenuous to issue statements, dash off a tweet, or deliver remarks about diversity and inclusion if your leader or the person that's running the organization doesn't have any idea of what they're talking about or why they're doing it. And so I think here at the league, and I've been here for about 2 years, what's not fun being in the communications department is having to walk back or reissue statements that don't make the mark, right? And so I'm not suggesting that we don't have authentic leadership, but sometimes we've gone with our action before we understand what that knowledge is, what the intent was, and that everybody was on the same page with that conviction of what we were trying to say. And so those 4 elements are critical to authentic leadership. So again, I think if I haven't said it enough, knowledge, intention, conviction, and action are important as you advance and fortify the mission of the Center for Public Trust. So it demonstrates your respect for the public that you serve, but then it also earns and retains that trust. So with that, I am going to say thank you for the opportunity for me to be able to talk about those 4 critical things. And then I just want to turn it over to Cedric and to all of you to ask me any questions.
Wow, Tracy, thank you. That was powerful and very relevant, right? Because I think everything you said is so true. And I think it's good for them, because I didn't go through your bio. I'd love to hear kind of how you got to where you are. Now, I know as your friend, how proud I've been watching you kind of maneuver through communications, politics, and now the NFL, but I'd love for them to hear some of the great opportunities that you've had over the last several years.
Sure. So I am from Nashville, am a proud graduate of Tennessee State University. I was a criminal justice major, and my dream job was to be an FBI agent. And I actually interviewed with the FBI. And at the time when I interviewed, they were looking for candidates that had a CPA a JD, or an MBA. And so I was like, okay, I'm a criminal justice major. Let me go off to law school. So I left to go to law school, but my senior year of college, I had to do an internship. And under the criminal justice program, I had to go, the only internship available was at the prison. And my dad wasn't going to let me go to the prison. I was like, but I'm about to be this FBI agent and I can do this. And he was like, no, go find something else. So I had an opportunity to work at the state legislature in Tennessee. And so I interned there, and sort of the political bug kind of bit me. I had an opportunity to work on then Governor McWhorter's reelection campaign after I'd graduated. And then worked in his office before I went to law school. And so I sort of had the political bug, but still had this law enforcement dream. Al Gore and Bill Clinton became president and vice president, and I was in law school and had this epiphany that I need to move to DC. So I moved to DC to work in the Senate, and I never looked back. And so I've sort of dabbled in politics, in communications. I'd worked for the Association of Attorneys General. Had an opportunity to work in PR. So I've sort of gone back and forth. I think the theme of what I do now is the intersection of politics, entertainment, and now sports. And so I worked on the Gore campaign in 2000. I worked on Hillary's 2008 campaign. I had an opportunity to work with Bob Johnson, who's the founder of Black Entertainment Television, but during his second act. And I did all of his corporate communications and public affairs across 16 entities, sports, entertainment, gaming, you name it, Bob has done it. And then after 10 years of doing that, and again, I know we met, we're just 30, so this is, even before I was born, but I had this, dream. I've always loved football, and I was like, let me go for it. And I did. And so it's every job that I've ever had all rolled into one that I get to do here. Make a difference, be that authentic leader, and take all of the skills and contacts and bring that to bear here.
Absolutely. Tracy and her sister and I go way back. Mm-hmm. And so I'm always getting updates on what Tracy's doing. And seriously, I can't be more proud of what you've done. And I recognize that a lot of the work that you've done, you probably have a lot of glass around your feet. You've had to break through a few barriers yourself. And I'm just curious, from your perspective, working with all the various organizations, political candidates and organizations, even with the NFL, like how important and how critical is diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I know you kind of framed that on the front end, but even in your own experience, how important has it been for your own success?
So it's really interesting because I use the fact that I went to Tennessee State, had this opportunity to be at the state legislature, and it was all of the universities within the Tennessee system that there was an internship. So Tennessee State was the only HBCU, and take that back, actually Fisk. So there were two of us in the intern class that were African American, and everybody else was not. And so just to be able to represent my institution, because when we'd watch the news, anything bad that happened, TSU would get, front coverage. And no offense if anybody went to Vanderbilt, but Vanderbilt wouldn't get the same type of coverage, or a UT or something like that. So it was really important just that I was representing, that I was Tennessee State when I walked through the halls of the legislature. And so that was one piece to the diversity part that I thought was important. When I moved to DC to go to the Senate, I actually knew that I was going to get the position because I was the only Black person in the office out of 40 people. And so because I had a relationship with the governor, the assistant or deputy governor, who then became the senator, I was able to call because I'd worked there and just say, hey, I want to come. And so it was important because all of the issues, I was a legislative correspondent, so you would get all of this mail and I had to respond to all of this mail. And I was the one that, I call them the social ills. So I had to deal with the healthcare, motor voter, dealing, gays in the military, like all of that was just starting when I was there. And so to be able to speak to different audiences, and a lot of the constituents that were writing were African American. So it was like, okay, well, I can at least speak from the community. And so I think that that's important, because again, you've got to have diverse voices, you've got to have people that look like you've got to have, the experiences, because if your experience is only one way and you don't know any other way, there's not much there, right? So I think it's really important. In every job that I've had, I've always tried to look through the lens of diversity, not, saying, oh, everything's got to be, Black or female, but just we bring different things to the table. And it's important to celebrate all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I know the NFL, you're at again, one of my favorite sports is the NFL, football. And I know that they've really come under a lot of scrutiny over the years because there's been really a lack of people of color in ownership, lack of people of color in terms of the coaching staffs. I know even on this website, I see that there's been a study done just about every year that looks at the hiring practices and the mobility of coaches to see how many diverse candidates are being replaced with other diverse candidates, or et cetera, et cetera. Even the front offices, that there's just been a big challenge there. And I know I got to give a shout out, because one of the things that really impressed me about Coach Aarons with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers was how diverse his coaching staff was. And just as a personal note, just to see them win the Super Bowl, I'll reserve my feelings and thoughts about Tom, especially being a Titans fan and how we battled the Patriots a lot. But aside from that, to know that there were 10 African-American coaches, which included an assistant head coach, the defensive coordinator,
the top three,
top three, offensive coordinator, the special teams, and then he even had 2 female coaches as part of his staff. That's huge.
It is.
And we know that the Rooney Rule was put in place to try to address some of the issues in terms of lack of diversity within the NFL. And we've seen even some scrutiny around that they interview one person and each team interviews that same person, and then they still pick the candidate of choice. So what is the NFL really doing now to try to really address that head on from 2021 and beyond?
Sure. So the interesting thing is, you're referring to the Tides report, and it's a report that they go to all of the sports leagues or professional sports leagues, and they rate, diversity from ethnicity, from gender, from coaching, from, all of our teams we call clubs. So at the club level and the league office. And so every year when it comes to the head coaches or ownership, we get a D or an F. Since 2003, when the Rooney Rule was implemented, and we were probably at the height in 2008 with over 7 Black head coaches and general managers. And so coming out of last year's hiring cycle, the Workplace Diversity Committee, which is chaired by Mr. Rooney, so of the Rooney family, whom the Rooney Rule is named after, we probably talked every month, the ownership, the committee members, the commissioner, the head of our football operations, the Fritz Pollard Alliance, which is an organization that we work very closely with that, keeps us accountable when it comes to who are we looking at in the pipeline. And so there were, 7 or 8 things that were done over this past season to try and elevate and promote ways, to create more developmental, educational interactions with ownership. And of course, we were in a pandemic, so we ended up doing a lot of things, virtually, which I think gave people more of an opportunity to interface, because you didn't have to travel and you could set up these events and more people were able to come. So they enhanced the Rooney Rule. So it's not just, at the head coaching level, but now at the club level, if you're going to hire a senior position, that you have to at least interview a person of color or a woman in those senior positions. And these are the off the field positions, but on field that you interview at least 2 minority candidates. And so, and just really quick, so for those that aren't aware of what the Rooney Rule is, the Rooney Rule was put in place to create opportunities, because if you look at our player population is 77% Black. So when you look at the ownership and head coaching, it doesn't reflect who's playing on the field. And so the Rooney Rule was implemented to create opportunity. It's a tool. So it's not something that says, okay, I interviewed you, and it's not a requirement to hire, but it at least opens the door and gives people the opportunity to be seen and have that opportunity to interview. So we implemented all of these policies and tools this year, and at the end of this year in this hiring cycle, we had 7 head coaching positions that were open, and they were all filled, and 2 were and I use the word minority because one was Black, and that was in Houston, and then Robert Saleh, who's with the Jets, is Lebanese. And so we had 2 people of color that were hired. But for a small gain, and people aren't talking about this, and I'm not saying that we should be celebrating like, oh my gosh, we just knocked it out of the park. These are steps in the right direction. But there were 7 general manager positions, and that GM is in the ear and the right hand to the owner of that team. And so out of the 7 positions that were open, 3 African Americans were hired. So Atlanta hired a Black GM, Detroit hired a Black GM, and the Washington football team did the same. And then when you talked about Coach Arians and the different open positions from the coordinator position, so you had 13 positions that were open, and 3 were people of color. Same on the defensive side, there were 6 out of 13 minorities that were hired, and then same with special teams, 4 out of 10. So the numbers on the GM side, the assistant GM, and the coordinator side. So these are the folks that, the offensive coordinator, oversees like quarterbacks and the offensive side of the ball. Special teams or, kickoff return folks, and then defensive is the defensive side. And those are significant positions. And those positions also lead to head coaching jobs. So to have people of color in those positions is far more than where we were last year. So it's progress, it's small steps, but the league, the commissioner, the ownership, very, very committed to ensuring that we move in the right direction. And then a lot of people, we do these Super Bowl press conferences and get the commissioner ready. And the first question, and I've only been here 2.5 years, but this is, the 3rd season for me. First question is, when's Colin Kaepernick going to get a job? And that's not going away. Like it is what it is, right? And we, the league, we don't hire. All we do is, try to create opportunities for relationships. It is the clubs that hire, but the commissioner doesn't believe we're one versus the other. We are collective. So if they're not doing it, then we, take that ownership too, right? So he still has free agency. So there's still another, year left on his contract. I know before I started here, there were opportunities for him to come on with teams, but they weren't starting positions, and he opted not to do that, and that's his prerogative. But I don't think the door is closed. But until I know that until he either says he's not wanting to play anymore or gets hired, that's something that is going to remain, the first question. So.
Absolutely. And we're getting some questions in the
Sure.
And I know Aaron raised her hand, but one question from Kurt, he actually brought up Eric, and I'm going to mess up
the enemy. Mm-hmm.
Has seemed to be the top head coaching candidate to Chief for the last 2 off seasons, but didn't get a head coaching job. So he's asking again about, with the Rooney Rule, how could diversity inclusion still improve? So I think you did kind of touch on that, but you're showing, and honestly, Tracy, I didn't realize that all of those things that happened. I knew of some of those things. I've got a good friend who works for the Washington football team, and we are in touch with each other from time to time. So I did know that there was a GM there. So
GM, assistant GM, and the president.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Well,
and their head coach is Hispanic. So Dan Snyder is knocking it out the park.
for once. Okay. Sorry, this is being recorded. There was another question as far as diversity and inclusion is concerned. What is a common mistake that you've seen throughout the multiple organizations that you've been a part of?
When you say mistake, like what leadership has not done, I think, and this in organizations that I'm in, have been in, and just in general, it starts at the top. And this is no slight to the HR space, but a lot of times they'll put diversity in the HR bucket. So it feels like it's like, okay, well, we've got these, numbers to make, as opposed to having it at the leadership level or at the executive level and the C-suite level, where everything that each of the business units are focused on, or where people are talking, that diversity, equity, and inclusion is part of just the culture of the organization. And that is, it starts from the top. It's not, let's, put this over here in the corner to say we did it. And I've seen a lot, just in this last year, where organizations are really, stepping up, if you will. And I think it's a business imperative. Again, if you are, doing consumer goods or just interfacing with people, like you have to include that. When I worked in a PR agency called Odie Public Relations. And one of our clients was the Department of Labor. And within the Department of Labor is the Office of Disability Employment Policy. And so ODEP they weren't, folks that were like, okay, we're going to the company to make sure you've, have, people with disabilities that are working for you. We were talking about how to educate organizations to consider and look at people with disabilities as employees. I mean, there were studies that show that if it's, snowing outside, that, the person with the disability is going to be at work before the person that didn't have a disability, like all of these things. And one of the things that I saw in working there is there was a bank that had a teller who was blind. And word got out in that community that there was a blind teller at the bank. And so people that were blind started, doing business at that bank because they saw somebody that looked like them. I saw Nordstrom a while back when they were doing, their clothing and advertising. You started seeing, people in wheelchairs. And so people knew that they're inviting me, somebody that looks like me, to do business with them, and that they care and they believe about, whatever the particular issue is. So I think it is imperative. I think it's got to start at the top. I mean, what I've seen, if it hasn't started there, so you've got people that are working toward that. And a lot of times, if it's not at the top, maybe there's an opportunity to do it from the ground up. If you think of just this horrific year with the pandemic, and then all of the racial injustice that happened, and just how it just caught everybody, there's some, groups obviously that have been familiar with this, and the Black community has been dealing with this for a long time, but the pandemic put everybody on an equal playing field. It didn't matter if you were rich, didn't matter if you were poor, didn't matter if you were famous. We were all sitting at home. We were all, on an equal footing. And at that point, that's when it's like, when and how do we, start looking forward, and how do we become inclusive and make sure that everybody's, being brought to the table and have a voice. So.
Absolutely. Great point. Absolutely. We all definitely were leveled out with this pandemic. So,
yeah.
So Erin Santiago, I know, raised her hand. Did you have a question, Erin?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good, thank you. I just first wanted to thank you, Tracy, for being here and speaking for us. It's been wonderful. This is a loaded topic for sure. Yeah, so I was just trying to figure out, and I want to make sure that I'm not coming off in any kind of way to offend anybody when I say any of this.
Sure.
In regards to the mistakes that people make when they're hiring, so my fiance works for the union. Okay, he is an electrician, and he was working for a company, and the company needed to fix their ratios. So what they did is they had one of their supervisors walk up to somebody, and they said, "We're going to have to let you go." The reason they let him go was because he was a white male. They told him that.
sounds illegal. I mean, just
It does, exactly. They said we have to let you go, and it's because you're a white man.
You can't do that.
So I'm worried that this is going to become a trend.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand that there's, the racial issues that go with everything, and I don't want to get into all that.
Yeah, no, I that's fine. That's fine.
I had a couple of notes written down because I knew this was going to happen, and I was going to be like, I don't remember what I was trying to say. So what happens when you get somebody who is qualified to do this job, and all of a sudden somebody comes along that may not be as qualified, and they want to hire this person to fix their ratios. However, they can't hire this person because they don't have a slot for them. So they go and fire somebody.
See that, and I'm not an HR professional, and I know unions have there's a whole nother way unions work, but just on the surface of what you're talking about, everybody's an at-will employee if that's how a company is set up, right? Or the union, but the union's job is to protect that person, right? And so it feels very disingenuous. It doesn't feel like that's legal. Again, I don't know the specifics beyond that, but technically you're not, to fill and I hate to say it, but to fill a quota or to get some numbers, that is not the way things are doing. Like if you're saying, like I can just use our example here. So these head coaches that are going after these positions, we're not picking them because they're Black, they're qualified, right? And
right.
So same here, I have a job, I'm an electrician, I'm doing something, and I get a tap on the shoulder because you need space to fill, like create another position. Like that, what you've just said just does not sound, well, it's clearly not ethical, but it just doesn't even sound legal. And so I don't know if there's any recourse that the person has, but that just,
I don't know if any recourse came from that, but I do know that when he just got on with his new job, my fiance, he wasn't the one fired, but when he got on with his new job, he ended up being told or asked to put down specific things. He is also a white male. Mm-hmm. He was asked to put down specific things so that he could be considered a minority. So, I know that they do the minority thing sometimes because they're looking for ratios for diversity and for tax reasons. So
yeah, but if you think about diversity in general, and just like how the from a business standpoint, how the Small Business Administration defines it. So it's race, it's gender, so there's certain metrics that as the SBA defines it. Because if you think about it, a lot of times when they say women in minority-owned business, that goes to white women before women of color, because it fits the category based on this definition. So it depends on if it's private union. Again, I'm not very familiar from a union standpoint. I mean, we our players are part of the Players Association, which is our union, but we're on this side, they're on that side. We work, we negotiate, but I don't know from that, everything you've just said just doesn't sit right. So
no, not at all. Okay,
and I'm sorry that they've gone through that. And what's I think what's really unfortunate about that is that type of action and activity leads to the divide instead of everybody coming together. So it is, if the person was Black or Hispanic or a woman or whatever that person was that ended up filling, the other person is going to be resentful to that group because they lost something to make way for somebody else, when it shouldn't be like that, because we should all have the opportunity to excel and have that opportunity to participate, with not at the expense of somebody else.
Right. And he didn't fill it out any other way than what he feels is correct. Mm-hmm. Because he doesn't want to be forced to be somebody that he's not.
Absolutely. Nope, that makes sense.
Thank you so much for answering my question. I really appreciate it.
Great question. I appreciate that.
I will say too, that's part of why as the Center for the Public Trust, we are also focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion because, again, you can see here, we are, there are ethical decisions that are made, either to hire, not to hire, to be diverse or not. And in the end, we want the best opportunity for everyone so that the companies can be successful. So Jacob, I see you raised your hand. Do you have a question for Tracy?
Yeah, I just have a question because you kind of mentioned like assistant coaches and like the need for like diversity there, which I think is really important because I think I was reading like the other day that like I think like with minorities, they only like account for like 35% of like assistant coaches in the NFL. So like what are you guys doing to like maybe promote more diversity in those like ranks like below head coaches so there are more choices? Because even like this year was like be like we kind of talked about, there's Be Enemy and there's like a few others, but I think like if there's only 35%, like if there's more like to choose from, then probably more will, be successful in getting jobs too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to say when I was talking about this pipeline, so we look at coaches within the league, but then also at the collegiate level. And so we're in the off season now, but we'll have like a QB summit. There are all of these, different areas, and we did expand the opportunity for coaches below the OC, DC special teams. And so that is part of everything that our football operations group and the clubs are doing together. But yeah, that's the numbers going back to, there's 77% of the players are Black, right? And so once they retire, like, do some of them want to go into coaching, scouting? Like, we have all of these fellowships and all of these different things to create, those opportunities. We look at the different coaching trees, who is under Belichick, who is under, Arians, and all of that plays in the factor. And then even, who some of their I'm blanking on the word. I was about to say scouts, but that's not what I'm looking for. The agents, who are some of those agents and who do they have relationships with? So all of those things play into that. But we really, during the off season, spend a lot of time trying to ensure that there's a level playing field for everybody to have that opportunity. We just saw in one of the recently where one of the coaches, brought somebody in and they ended up not being there because of the history that they had somewhere else. And you talk about a vetting process, and sometimes people miss the mark, and you bring in people that that you think are going to do the best. And that's what we just hope for, is that we have an opportunity, and then that you hire the person that's going to do the best for that team. So
well, we had another question come in on chat,
Jacob.
Eric, and this one I know is important to you, so you can speak to this. He says, in my work experience, diversity has certainly been a challenge. Access to leadership positions is one major part, but the other piece is mentorship to succeed and reach greater heights. Can you speak to some of the challenges and opportunities that you've experienced coming up the ranks?
Sure. I think, and it's really interesting because people will always say, oh, you need to mentor me, or can you be my mentor? And I actually think that's a two-way street. It doesn't have to be, the most senior person in an organization. And I've always tried to approach mentorship, and I do that in air quotes because I think there's mentorship and then there's an advocate for you, right? And so when you go work at an organization, if there's somebody in that organization that has, there's something about them that you're like, you want to emulate or you want to know more about, I have always just, gone up to people and say, hey, I'd love to talk to you about how you got to here, or, could we do coffee? Could we meet for lunch? And now everything's virtual. So could we, do a virtual check-in? And then just, you look for if there's a path that you're trying to go down and there's something that, somebody's got that you're interested in, don't worry that they're the CEO or the senator or this. Like I always say, we all put our pants on the same way, and there's nobody that is above talking to. And I think when you're talking about authenticity, when you approach people in an authentic way, like you're going because you want to find out something, you want to learn more of something, not, oh, I'm just going to talk to that person because they're the EVP. Like they may leave this job and not be the EVP tomorrow. So do you still want to talk to them, or are you talking to them, because of what they have to offer? And so I think, being able to approach people, and I hate to use the word scared, but not being shy about going after, trying to talk to somebody. And if they say, don't have time for you, then find somebody else. But again, it doesn't have to be, somebody, that's over you, but maybe somebody that's had this journey. Then when I talk about the advocacy side of that, you work with people, you're around people, and they know your character, they know, what you're capable of, they see that you try, they see, that you're doing things. So if you're not in the room and somebody's there saying, oh, I'm trying to find this, or need somebody to work on the X project, they could say, you know what, I've been around Ashley, for so long, and I know that, if she sees that something's not happening, she will go do it, even if it's not in her job description or her scope. So there's a way that you carry yourself, and, how I am in front of you talking is how I should be talking to the person next door. I shouldn't, be acting one way in front of said person versus the other. I'll use a perfect example. On the 08 campaign, we were in Memphis. I was working with Hillary. She was getting ready to do an interview. And the focus, we were losing. Obama had all the delegates. We were just riding out the wave, right? And I remember we were doing an interview, and the focus was with the Black press. And she was like, "Okay, I think I'm going to say, I understand." And I stopped her, and I was like, at that time she was a senator. I said, "With all due respect, Senator," I said, you don't understand. I said, "So all you can do is talk about what you've done, when you were First Lady of Arkansas, when you were a senator, but what you've done in the community to try and help make things better, and what you would do if you were president. But what you shouldn't say is that you understand." I said, "Because you're not a Black person, so you don't." And I was able to tell her that, but she hired me not to tell her what she wanted to hear. She hired me for my counsel, and it would not have served her well for me to allow her to make that statement, because, the Black press and Black people back then, we would have thrown her under the bus. And so you have to feel comfortable with who you are, and just going in and saying, "This is what I need from you. This is what I want from you. This is how, I need to grow." And you do that by doing some of what I've just talked about.
Absolutely. And I want to go back to one thing that you said, because throughout my career too, you always want to have someone that will be your champion. So you, the example of identifying Ashley as a great candidate for a project. A lot of that, the role that you said in terms of upward mentorship. So you identify people that you want to be like, or you want to help develop you. You get that exposure with them, you get those opportunities for projects, and then they will champion you inside the organization. So absolutely great point.
Well, here's another thing. So, and I don't know where you guys are in what level, what year you are in college, but when there are internship opportunities, and you go do an internship, and you're going into the internship, and you're doing A, B, and C because that's what they told you were doing. And then you get there and they're like, "Oh, we forgot X, Y, and Z, and you're not really going to do A, B, and C. Just do X, Y, and Z." And because whatever you're presented with, I truly believe things happen for a reason. Part of that might be to see how you react to not, doing what you thought you were going to do. It may not even be of any interest to you, but do it with everything that you've got, because I always think that shows that you're willing to go the extra mile. You're willing to do something. You were handed a box of rocks, but you're going to turn those rocks into a nice rock garden. And so people notice that, and that in and of itself helps with that advocacy and mentorship, because you're going to do what you need to do to get it done, and that goes a long way.
Absolutely. So we had one more question from Sean, and the question is, what are some practices that could be implemented to better match company policies and personnel with the community that the company is serving?
So Read that one more time.
So
Oh, it's in the chat function. Let me look in chat. Hold on. So what are some practices that could be implemented to better match company policies and personnel with the community? So we have, and I should know this, I know the integrity one. I'm just gonna look over here really quick at my at our company values, which is integrity, resiliency, respect, and responsibility to team. And so at the NFL, those 4 pillars are what, you know, we strive for. Even when we do our reviews, when we are looking to hire people, it's like, you know, how do they match, you know, those 4 areas? And when you don't have that, then that's when, you know, there's a misfire. So, you know, our number one thing is to our fans. Like our fans, we would not have the NFL if we didn't have our fans. And, you know, we've got, I'd say the majority of fans, or well, how do I want to say this? The fans that we've had for a long time are, you know, season ticket holders and, you know, folks that have just been, you know, rock solid. We got a new generation of fans that we are trying to encourage to be a part of the organization. And when you talk about what are, you know, diversity and challenges, the older generation set in their ways. So, you know, let me just go back to the Colin Kaepernick issue. So he kneeled to make a statement about what was happening in the Black community. Our fan base was not happy with that. Our partners were not happy with that. Because at the end of the day, while we are a sports and entertainment company, we are also a business, and business equals bottom line, right? Revenue. And so that, and I wasn't here, but I know a lot of my colleagues, African-American colleagues, were like at a crossroads, and same with the players. Like, you know, do we support what we know the issue is, or, you know, do we, you know, come in and try to do our jobs best we can, and from a player standpoint, play. We saw what happened this summer and this spring, or, you know, so Breonna Taylor, Ahmaud Arbery, George Floyd, Jacob Blake, like all of these things. And then folks were like, you know what, enough's enough. And so we need to talk about this. So to have, you know, Colin Kaepernick be the catalyst for that, put everybody on another, you know, trajectory of what do we do when we talk about diversity and values and leadership. And so I remember I was talking to one of our partners who, you know, their membership was not happy again with what happened several years ago. And so this year I talked to them and I said, okay, well, it's a new generation. You guys are doing the same thing we're trying to do, is get to that next generation. And that next generation is not tolerating what we've tolerated in the past. And so it's trying to get leadership and you know, everybody to get on that same page of how do you overcome the challenge and meet the needs of everybody. And so I think, you know, we've tried to do a good job there. Our social justice initiative, it didn't just start when George Floyd got killed, but it did start, in my personal opinion, when the commissioner responded to the players by saying, I should have listened. And from that moment, our partners, our grant partners, and people that would never stand up for us before were like, okay, well, it's time for us to listen, and let's see if we're really walking that talk. And the players have been walking the talk this entire time, and the league and the clubs and the owners have, but not in a way that is visible as what you may have seen if you've tuned into, you know, football this season, where you saw end racism in the end zone. We had the helmet decals where players had the opportunity, if they wanted, volunteer to either put 4 phrases or the names of victims on their helmet. So it's a learning cycle. It is something that is delicate, but, you know, every day I think we try to do better. And that diversity, again, if it's just, you know, one group of people making the decisions about everything, we're not gonna to get very far. And so I think this year has really allowed other voices and people to come to the table that reflect everyone else outside. So it's been a year.
Yes. Well, and I know when we were trying to get this all set up, I was texting with you, and you had just finished up the video that aired during the Super Bowl.
Mhm.
And I don't know if anyone else on the call saw that video, but it was a really lengthy video, and it was very powerful. Just the imagery, the conviction that it gave me as well. So my hat's off to you and the team that pulled that all together. That was really, really powerful.
Yeah, no, it is. And going back to diversity, so you've got the marketing team, our social responsibility team, football operations, it's everybody, and there's a mix. So you've got women, men, Black, white, Hispanic, Asian. It was really diversity, old and young, that were at the table making this happen. But really the players, led on this, and we're just trying to do the right thing.
So you just answered the magic question. When there's diversity, there's going to be tension because there's diversity of thought.
Yep.
But the outcome is going to be much more powerful and impactful.
Yep.
So
that is true.
That's huge. We did have one more question come in, and I have one parting question.
Sure.
How do you approach diversity conversations that may be uncomfortable or contentious to ensure that issues in the workplace can be addressed without creating new problems?
So let me give you two things. One, you can have a conversation and everybody's entitled to their opinion, and you just have to be able to respect other people's opinions, right? So just because person A thinks one thing, person B, people approach things from their experience, from where they came from what they know. And so you have to be open to hearing other thoughts. So I think you guys have heard, just based on, where I've worked and who I've worked for, that, I did work at a bipartisan PAC. So I've worked on both the Republican and Democratic side, but all of the folks that I've worked for in politics have been on the Democratic side. But be assured that I'm always, watching Fox News. I'm watching, this is, when I was in politics, but watching what, the other side, if you will, was talking about. So I knew where they were coming from. When I worked with Bob Johnson, so he is a Democrat, but he's the first Black billionaire. So his money spends Republican, but he's a Democrat. And I remember he was invited by a Republican member to come talk about issues that actually affected the Black community. And I remember getting all of these calls, and people were like, how could he be there supporting? And I was like, you're missing the whole point. This isn't about Republican or Democrat. This is about the issue and how is it going to affect people. So if you take a step back and hear what he was saying and why we were invited and what, the outcome is supposed to be, then that's where you find the diversity and where you can come together. So conversation. So how do you have a conversation without, making things contentious? So let's go back to this summer, George Floyd. So we're already in a pandemic. Everybody's already on edge. Then you're seeing this. And as a Black person, you're exhausted, you're tired, you're sick of seeing, what we've witnessed. And we started having these conversations. We had town halls. What are we going to do as an organization? We, talk about diversity, and we talk about inclusion, and we talk about all these things. How are we going to address that? Well, we had some tough conversations, but then on the other side, folks are like, well, my dad's in law enforcement and he should not be vilified because of what happened to George Floyd. And part of that conversation was what social justice and what everything that we've been working on is focused on is not all of law enforcement. It is not like we couldn't have civil rest if we didn't have law enforcement, right? So there are bad actors. And that's what this was addressing, but it got the messaging, and just in general, just not just at the NFL, but as a whole, everybody, just was like, oh, everybody's against law enforcement. That is not the case. And so to have those conversations and, talking to members of your team, and they would get heated because I know where I was coming from and they knew where they were coming from, but have that conversation so we could understand. And I think the other thing that you saw over the summer is when the Jacob Blake incident happened and the Detroit Lions were like, we're not practicing today. We are going to have a conversation. and we are going to talk about what this means. And what we learned from that, and all of the clubs, did that at some point. Again, players were like, I can't today. And so what I saw from the players is that there were conversations that happened in the locker room. Coaches and everyone were supporting. And you had the Black players saying, when I leave the practice facility and I get in my car and I go this way, I'm not, superstar NFL player. I'm just a Black guy driving down the street. Anything can happen. You white player leaves and you go to the left, you don't even have anything to worry about. And so those conversations were happening. So I know that this whole year has really tested all of us to listen and to respect where people come from and to have those hard conversations. But no, you can have those hard conversations and still have respect for each other. You just have to listen and be willing to hear why, people are coming from where they are. And I think that also sparks, action, right? So back to my 4 points of, the knowledge, what's your intent? How are you going to be, convicted in ensuring that the action takes place and that you are really walking the walk and not walking and pretending to be talking. So I hope that answered that. But this has been a powerful year. So it has been a powerful year.
Well, and also this has been a powerful conversation. So I know we only have 4 minutes left.
That's fun.
I want to officially thank you for your time today.
Absolutely.
But I do have one last question.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Any regrets that you did not go into the FBI?
Sometimes, only sometimes. So the reason I wanted to go into the FBI is because when I was in college, I marched in the band at Tennessee State. Yes. And there was this guy that was in the band, and he was there, and we still, it was a group of us that all hung out, and then one day he disappeared. He was an undercover FBI guy, and I don't know what he was there for, but I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally be that person, and nobody would suspect me. But I'm scared of bugs. I don't like dirt. I don't want anybody touching me, so so I wouldn't do well. But it was a great. Literally, I think it was just more like the idea of doing that. So.
Well,
no regrets. I just police words now.
Yes. Listen, the Tracy I know is a very strong and powerful woman.
Thank you.
Who wouldn't have to be worried about bugs or dirt. Brings her own punch. So, Tracy, seriously, it's been a treat. It's been a pleasure. I hope that everyone on this call has enjoyed the conversation. So, again, on behalf of the CPT, definitely want to say thank you. And Ashley, I don't know if there's any parting words that you want to share with the group.
No, just check your emails. Later on today, we're going to be sending you a survey. If you guys wouldn't mind filling that out for us.
All right.
Oh, I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you guys. And if you have any other follow-up questions or need to know anything, just feel free to give a call. They know how to get in touch with me.
All right.
Tracy, thank you so much. This is Alfonso.
Hi.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Hearing your thoughts, and thank you for taking time to share this with us. I know you're very busy, and that you really blessed us today. Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you students, for participating as well. Good to see you again today.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tracy. I really appreciated everything that you said today.
I
just realized actually that I've got my
I saw the ERS and I was trying to figure out if that was is that a college? But yes, okay. I know, disappointing toward the end, but Aaron's coming back, so.
Get there. All right, we'll see you later.
All right, thank you.
Guys.
All right.